Fabulous. I accidentally pressed the button that turns off this thing, and so I was continuing to talk, and the video was recording silently. It was just a beautiful manifestation of how I already feel, talking into a void. But alas, if I want to put this on the internet, take two. I thought that I had already recorded this, but it turned out that my microphone had run out of battery. So all of the video is just silent. I went to my husband and complained about this, and he showed me some video of a bodybuilder named Ronnie to get me all pumped up again to do another take. And in that video, Ronnie just repeatedly screams at himself in an encouraging way and says, "Lightweight, baby, ain't nothing but a peanut, lightweight." And that's what I'm going to say to myself. I'm going to do this again. Lightweight, nothing but a peanut. Let's go. Another week of where am I? What am I doing? Where am I going? How am I going to find out? I have a lot of thoughts this week, starting with a video came up on my YouTube For You page of Emma Chamberlain. And she's being interviewed ages ago about how quickly she went viral. And the takeaway from the video, I think, is supposed to be that she went viral quite quickly. But my takeaway was a comment that she made about her dad. In it, she says that her dad was the one that said to her, "You could really make something of this. Keep going. You're doing a good job." And she was constantly in a state of self doubt, like, why am I doing this? I shouldn't be doing this. This is stupid, imposter syndrome, etc., etc. And hearing her dad so clearly provide the antidote to her self doubt first made me almost start to cry. I think it's just the most incredible thing that a father could do for his daughter. It was just so lovely. But also, it reminded me how normal Emma Chamberlain's reaction is. Like, it's totally normal, expected even, to have self-doubt when you're trying something new. What you don't need is someone to contribute additional ideas for failure to you, which is essentially what my parents tend to do. Love my parents to death. I am so grateful for them. But their style of parenting is much more fear-mongering or risk aversion than supportive. And they're doing it because they love me and they want to be helpful, and they think that warding me off of failures or challenges is a way of keeping me safe and protected and financially viable and all these things that are really important to them. And I completely understand that methodology for parenting. I am not calling one wrong or bad or better or worse than another. I am just acknowledging what I need in this moment right now. Self-doubt is a feisty little bugger. It will continuously recur and recur. And instead of using the self-doubt as a justification for why you should quit, use self-doubt. This is what I'm telling myself. Use self-doubt as an expected starting point. Like, anytime I feel doubt, of course I feel doubt. I'm trying something new. Constantly look out for opportunities to find support, to find lightweight ain't nothing but a peanut. Like, find someone who is going to tell you, give it a go, just try, instead of here's all the reasons why you shouldn't try. Because trust me, you can brainstorm ad nauseum all the reasons not to do something. And the worst thing that you can do to yourself is allow that to quit before you even tried. And I've done that. I've been quitting before I've even tried. So yeah, that brings me to my book recommendation this week, The Prisons We Choose to Live Inside. It is a collection of Doris Lessing's lectures that she gave in 1985. I'm paranoid. I keep checking my microphone to make sure it's recording. So it's a series of lectures she gave in 1985 about the behavioral sciences. Her argument is there is a wealth of information that the behavioral sciences have provided to us about patterns in human behavior. And unfortunately, we aren't doing enough to take that information and apply it to our lives to make our lives actively better. What does that have to do with trying to build a career? Turns out a lot. In addressing the behavioral science studies that she thinks could really help us improve the human experience, she talks about groupthink and the power of it. Groupthink is prevalent in everything that we do, including how we build a career. If you will indulge me, a brief personal story time. My last year of college, I had completed all my credits, so I didn't have to take any more classes. Instead, spent the entire year working on only one thing, which was writing a thesis about the postmodern sublime in French philosophy, literature, and art. I was obsessed with this subject. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. I loved it. Nerd alert. I don't even care. It was just awesome. My parents were understandably saying, okay, Haley, what are you going to do? You have to get a job. What's your plan? What do you want to do for a living? So far as I know, no one's hiring someone to write a thesis on postmodern French philosophy. What's your deal? Simultaneously, I was writing an article about kinds of jobs that specifically Georgetown graduates get when they graduate. And in order to write that article, I went to the Career Center at Georgetown and I interviewed the man who runs the whole thing. We had a wonderful conversation. I got my quotes for the article, blah, blah, blah. In the meeting, he was incredibly kind to me and said, I think you should give me your resume and I should help you find a job because you yourself are a senior. And I said, okay. So I made a resume, I gave it to him. Lo and behold, I get sent to New York to interview for an investment bank. This is the very, very beginning of my senior year. I go on this trip to New York, have this very, very long interview with lots of different people, come back, find out I got the job. I haven't at this point really had a thoughtful dialogue with myself about what I wanted to do for a living, which sounds insane to me now because I think about it all the time. But at the time, I wasn't thinking about it at all. And I call my dad and I tell him that I got offered a job and he starts crying. The amount of proud that my parents are of me in that moment was like unlike anything I feel like I've experienced in my life. And having that positive reaction was so validating, coupled with the fact that I was so interested in my thesis that I didn't want to think about alternatives. Like I was handed on a silver platter a wonderful job with a great salary in a city I would love to live in. Why would I question it? Like, I'm just going to go back to the library and keep working on my thesis instead of finding alternatives to what is probably a great situation. So, my parents' pride, coupled with my interest in my thesis, is what made me immediately agree to the job offer and then head right back to the library with my head down and go about my business. But then the bill came due less than a year later when I had to move to New York, put on my suit, and show up at the front door of this investment bank and actually work there. I held out for like 2 years. And for 2 years, I had anxiety, depression, existential crises. I wasn't sleeping. It was gnarly. According to my parents, according to society's standards of success, I was thriving, but I didn't feel like I was thriving. I could not do it anymore. I walked in one day and I quit. To this day, it's one of the bravest things I've ever done. And I'm incredibly proud of myself for having done that because I quit without another job opportunity and I had to just totally transform my life and move out of my apartment and was sleeping on a mattress basically in my friend's closet. And I had to everything about my life changed. And I am so proud of myself for having done that. But it registered for my parents as the biggest mistake of my life. It's taken me a second, but there's nothing wrong with their reaction. Like their reaction is a reflection of their choices in life. They are risk averse. They like certainty. They like linear progress. They like the things that this investment bank offered me. So they couldn't understand why it wasn't satisfying me when it would be plenty satisfying to them. I quit because my creativity, my drive to discover something else, something outside of the expected that might work better or more authentically for me was strong enough that I couldn't live their version anymore. And reading this is so validating because it reminds you of groupthink. It reminds you that actually it doesn't make you a bad person or dumb for being influenced by other people. It is what makes you sane. She actually has a quote in here. The natural reaction to almost everyone hearing about the social research of groupthink is to say, of course, I would never succumb like that silly person. I would be immune. But the more sane we are, the more likely we are to be converted. Brainwashing techniques are built off of how a normal person's brain works. So if you succumb to the brainwashing, it's because your brain is functioning normally. Brainwashing has like such an intense connotation. It doesn't have to be even as extreme as that. She gives the example, we are all of us to some degree or another brainwashed by the society we live in. We are able to see this when we travel to another country and are able to catch a glimpse of our own country with foreign eyes. This groupthink, this form of brainwashing that occurs in small and large scale is par and parcel of our lives. We live social existences, and what someone else, particularly an authority in your life, like your parents, but any kind of authority in your life, what they think of what you're doing is an important factor in how you see yourself and see the journey that you're on and whether or not it's the right or wrong direction. When I quit, I think I thought the very next move I made would be the right one. And this was going to be a temporary episode of my life where I did something inauthentic and I would immediately recover and go into something that was more appropriate for me. And that's not what happened. What happened is actually exactly what she describes in this book. At a time when one set of attitudes is in the process of changing to another, it is easy to see the hedging your bets mechanism. She's talking about how when there's two different mindsets, there's a tendency to kind of split the difference. There's a desire to find a balance between the two. So, on the one hand, I had this view that validation from society, from my parents, from people in authority, were promoting, which was one of following, making decisions for my career that were centered around safety and risk aversion. That was on the one side. And then on the other side was my instincts towards risk seeking, creativity, newness. When I quit, I thought I would kind of steamroll ahead on the creative, risk seeking side. But actually, what ended up happening is I tried to hedge a balance between the two. So, like she said, at a time when one set of attitudes is in the process of changing to another, it is easy to see the hedging your bet mechanism. So, in response to my parents' fears, society's fears projected on me, I attempted to hedge my bet by pursuing a safe path that they could approve of, whilst also trying to be creative and adventurous. Those two things are not possible. Those two things for me were not possible at the same time. And in fact, by hedging, I was constantly compromising myself. I was in what Doris Lessing describes as this gloomy anxiety. So there were sort of three options. She's describing an idea that became prevalent in society. And she says some people simply refused to believe it. Some people believed it instantly without further examination. And some people fell into a gloomy, anxious state of suspended judgment. And that's the state that I was in. That was the hedging. I created these three options. It was either agree, disagree, or gloomy anxiety in between. Needless to say, it's been 10 years since then, and I am only now realizing that what I need to do is acknowledge the very rational pressures to follow authority and to follow society's expectations, but not let them direct my life, nor expect to hedge. There probably is not a narrative where you get to have your cake and eat it too. So I need to give up on the hedging, because that was a waste of my energy. It was exhausting trying to make myself and society and my parents and everything else happy. And instead, focus on what I want authentically. I have a definition of authenticity that I use as shorthand for myself, which is, do your actions align with what you think about yourself? A really simple example is if you define yourself as an avid reader, but you hardly read any books, then that would be an inauthentic expression about who you are. If I have an idea of people I admire and what I want to be, then I need to start acting like that in order to know if my actions are authentic. So the exercise that I did at the breakfast meeting with my husband, and I also did as a part of Becoming You, both of those things are things I mentioned in earlier videos if you're curious. But the part of the exercise where you think about whose life would you want? Who out there in the world is inspiring you professionally? What is their career made up of? How did they get there? Honestly, the how they got there isn't even as important. It's really like, what is their life made out of now that you find so appealing, and how could you get more of that in your life? That is the authentic pursuit. And that's what I am looking for. Thank you for bearing with me on this journey, because I feel like it's been kind of hard to explain how all of these things connect in my mind. But the last sort of step that actually brings us right back to the beginning is expect self doubt. Expect the doubt to come from other places, because we are participants in society, and consequently, we are in part brainwashed by the society that we live in. We need to acknowledge that and not berate ourselves for the difficulty and the self doubt that comes up when we try to do things that are new. Seek support, but also be incredibly clear with yourself about what you want, because it really shouldn't be what someone else wants for you. It shouldn't be a compromise between what someone else wants for you and what you want for yourself. It is what you want. And wading through the complications of what other people want is really difficult. It's hard to tell when they've influenced you or not, especially with social media. The entire time I was reading this book, I was thinking to myself, like, wait till she finds out about social media, because she's going to get all sorts of worked up about how easy it is to brainwash people with the advent of social media and AI, and whew, it's a downhill slope. But what I'll say is, we have the behavioral sciences that are conducting study after study after study about patterns in human nature. And it's those studies that will help us unlock the prison that we are choosing to live inside. God, I hope that made sense. I really bit off more than I could chew with this one. So, what am I going to do this week? I am going to research more creative companies that I could potentially apply to. I might not apply to them, but I'm going to certainly research them. I am going to make a vlog, which I started for the first time last week and really enjoyed. I think it allowed me to observe my own life through another set of eyes, and I was intrigued by what I discovered about myself. So I'm going to keep trying that. And I'm going to read another book, hopefully one that will be as fruitful as Doris Lessing. And another week of trying to discover what an authentic next step will be for me professionally. Find people who support you and hold on to them for dear life, because there is a never ending supply of self doubt. And what you really need is the very rare supply of support from other people and from yourself. If you can do it for yourself, that's great too. I think that's a skill. Don't quit before you've tried. Do not quit before you've tried. Good luck.